Hello and welcome to Let's Go Racing. My name's Leigh O'Gorman and you are?
Matthew Trivett, not Sam Collins.
Today we're talking about Formula 1 and Formula 1 2019. The season's just finished and we're here to talk all the ins and outs of this championship. Well, the F1 season has just finished and Lewis Hamilton confirming his prominence really in this championship.
Lewis, hell of a season again. I'm not the biggest Lewis fan, but I can't deny his performance level, certainly compared to his teammates over the recent years. But for me, it was more the interesting stuff of the weekend was the midfield battles, the final battles. I think McLaren, you could kind of look at both drivers' last laps, and that might have summed up some of their season. Lando not able to defend successfully against Perez, whereas Sainz made a brilliant last lap move against Hulkenberg to get the single point he needed to secure 6th in the championship, which is a huge result, considering 7th is ultimately the best you'd expect that car to do. I think he had a really rough start. Obviously, Australia, lap 4? He was already on fire, literally. And then I think in Bahrain, again, they had a failure. So 2 races down. Lando's looking strong. He's on the back foot. And I think he was spectacular racecraft this year. I think he looked so good. A number of times he started near the back, got into point position. I think McLaren, if you look at their 4th in the constructors, Lando had a lot of bad luck, but his race pace also wasn't quite developed enough yet. And I think that Carlos was the savior for that team this season. I would say he's probably their favorite Spaniard. I don't know that they were, the whole Alonso. I'm the biggest Alonso fan in the world, but I don't know if that ended quite so happily with all of the stress on that situation. Interesting
enough, Fernando was actually in Abu Dhabi at the weekend and almost seemed to be selling himself for a driver on the 2021 season.
It's unfortunate.
Will he come back?
Yeah, if he gets a gift. I don't think he can afford to come back and be in the midfield. He left on a high in terms of his reputation intact. He's one of the only drivers that went through changing teams and kind of falling off. You look at Villeneuve, right? Huge start in his career. Fell off and his reputation was tarnished before he even left F1. Alonso at least was able to keep his, and rightfully so, incredible racer. But, the more I've gotten to know people in motorsports, and it shames me to say it because I love him as a driver, he's a tough character to deal with, apparently. So I don't know that many teams would be too interested in signing up to work with him right away. If they want a one-off world champion, sure. Do you want to get him in a fast seat because there's no other options? Excellent choice. But if you're building up a team right now, not the best.
And of course, when we get to 2021, Alonso will already be in his 40s at that stage. That's a tough call to bring someone back into the sport.
Yeah.
Especially with all of the young talent we've had coming up through the ranks in the last few years. Speaking of young talent, it seems as if the lineup for 2020 has been solidified. Nicholas Latifi going to Williams.
2 Canadians now, just want to point that out.
Latifi, solid driver. He scored some race wins at F2 level. He's scored some wins at Formula 3 level. Brutally honest, probably not the most exciting driver in the world. But you know what? He's not bad either, and I think he'll do a reasonable job.
Well, this is honest motorsport news. So as a Canadian, I will be honest. He won't get as much flack as Lance Stroll, Mr. Tommy Hilfiger, Mr. Michael Kors, that is there because he bought his way in. I think Lance is a skilled driver, but paid opportunity from a very early age. Latifi, a lot of people won't know this. His family owns 30% of McLaren and is one of the biggest food wholesalers in Canada. I believe that's their biggest asset right now. It's also a money. Not to say they don't have skill, but the money was the opportunity growing up. So is he the most exciting driver? I'm with you. I don't know. I think he's skilled. Does he deserve a shot in F1? Yeah, he's probably proved that, but unfortunately, it seems like Canada's got to buy their way in. I guess I got to find someone out there. Maybe one of you can buy my way in somewhere. But yeah, he's not going to get as much because it's not as publicly known as much flack as Stroll gets. And I do think he seems mature. I was in Montreal in the paddock and walking around. He was, it was his first FP1. He was very composed all weekend and certainly ready to play the media part and was not fazed by any of that. But yeah, we'll see how he does. Going into Williams is a whole battle in itself. George Russell did excellent considering the circumstances, but that team's in a bit of a struggle right now.
And let's not beat about the bush. Latifi does bring funding. But what I find curious about the fact that Latifi is bringing funding, apparently it's rumoured, and we have to emphasise and underline the word rumoured, it's potentially $45 million per season.
Yeah.
That is a lot of money to effectively, potentially, come 19th.
Yeah, well, and I'll be honest too. I mean, being around the paddock, there was as much Latifi presence inside of the McLaren tent as there was in the Williams tent. And again, the ownership's there. So I think there's a longer term play. In effect, I've also heard a rumor that they're looking at buying a team in another way. I mean, there's lots going on there, but yeah, there's a ton of funding. Williams needs the funding. It's good for them. I'm still not sold on paid drivers, but such is the way in F1. I guess it's a business at the end of the day, and we need it to survive.
Of course, Kubica now out of the Williams and F1 program. He's looking to be testing DTM soon.
What do you make of his return to F1?
I think it was a very interesting, very good experiment. And I absolutely 100% applaud him for making it, for his efforts. I just don't get the impression it was ever going to really, truly come off. And I think the indication for that is Renault had the opportunity to take Kubica for the 2018 season. And they decided not to. They went for Carlos Sainz at the time.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to look beyond, you had to look beyond the headlines and think, well, actually, maybe there was more to Renault's decision than necessarily. And listen, Kubica brought money to the party as well.
Sure, yeah. I think for me, Kubica, and he said it himself when he announced that, I'm not going to be back next year. That to me that return is the story.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to judge him that strictly on performance, more so because he's in a Williams. Sure, George Russell was the better driver. Interesting enough, Kubica gets away as the only one to get a point between the two of them. The Hockenheim circumstances allowed that to happen, a single point, which is good for Williams because constructors' points equal funding as well. But strictly on a performance level, not the best season. But for me, it's the story. The fact that he was able to recover, he was able to return. I mean, that accident almost killed him, let alone, technically I think he's considered disabled based on his limited motion in some of that arm, and he's driving a Formula One car, and it was revealed they tried to develop a steering wheel specifically for him that they didn't get done in time because there was just so many other issues. So he was certainly driving, compromised in a lot of ways.
I think the unfortunate thing we've got to look back on Kubica's career is here was a guy who had so much potential, so much speed, so much talent, and it was cut short. And I'm going to just jump slightly. Is one of the drivers, of course, Kubica was driving for what was effectively the Renault team at the time. Yeah. One of the drivers leaving Renault now is Nico Hulkenberg. And here's a driver who came into F1 having won GP2 in 2009. Again, there was so much talent, so much emphasis on what this driver could do, where he could succeed, the amount of success he will have, and 177 Grand Prix and not even a podium.
It got a pole for Williams, Brazil, in a mixed weather session, and that's the key. It was a mixed weather session. He nailed it. Don't get me wrong. It was great that he hit the lap, but look what happened in the dry the next day when the green flag fell. I mean, he was sinking like a stone. So, look, I think he was kind of an interesting story in his timing because F1 goes in phases, and we're seeing it now. Alonso's now gone. Hamilton, what's the future hold for him?
Vettel, both the 34, 33 years old.
Vettel's about to go out, and he was considered the younger one of the last generation. I mean, obviously, Schumacher generation's gone, Villeneuve's gone. It comes in waves, though, because now, look, we're seeing Lando Norris, George Russell, Albon, Latifi. We're getting that the vacancies are being filled by the youngest possible talent. And Hulkenberg was right in the middle, which means he was always fighting for seat opportunities because the top guys and that older generation had those locked out. So, okay, was he against sort of the grain in opportunity? Maybe. But for me, I think overrated. I'm going to say it. I don't think he is what people made him out to be. His teammates all said he was this fierce competitor. Well, Ricciardo went in, and just as he did with Vettel, by the way, yeah, he did that to Vettel, maybe another overrated driver, spanked him in his first year at a team that Hulkenberg's been sort of the captain of for the last few years.
I'll throw 2 points in for you.
Okay.
Hulkenberg drove for Sauber, the Ferrari-powered Sauber team in 2013. Now, Ferrari have access to the data from the engines that Sauber use.
Yeah.
And it was rumoured at the time that Hulkenberg was possibly in line for this Ferrari seat after Massa left.
Yeah.
The seat that eventually went to Sebastian Vettel. Ferrari decided not to take Hulkenberg. It wasn't just a case that they went and got Vettel. They decided not to take Hulkenberg.
Yeah.
And you can't overstep that. You can't kind of ignore the fact there is a reason for these decisions are made.
And there was a rumor surfacing this year with the Vettel mid-season, is he falling out of love with Ferrari or vice versa, that, hey, if he goes and there's no one available, Hulkenberg is. I don't see it. I can't see him. He's never going to beat Leclerc. I'm sorry. If he goes to Ferrari, Leclerc's going to spank him. Left, right, and center.
And it's an interesting side issue, because I remember when it was the issue when Raikkonen left Ferrari last year, and for several seasons, people were wondering, why are Ferrari constantly holding on to Raikkonen? And then you look at the other options available and you think Grosjean, Hulkenberg, Perez, would they have done better than Raikkonen? And Hulkenberg, for me, falls into that kind of group of, here's a driver who will do a good job.
Yes.
Will he do an exceptional job?
Yeah, he's a dead consistent B driver, in my opinion. I don't think he's world championship material. He's never gone and done anything in a race where I go, damn, like, how did he do that? Or like, wow, he's wringing that thing out. He just seems to get what the car gives him.
Now, it's 21 race season. It's been a long season. The first F1 season since 1963 to end in December.
Yeah. And they want 25 races in the future. Give me a break.
You know, I've worked enough F1 in the past. I haven't done a full season by any stretch of the imagination, but I would not be able to.
I can't even make time to watch all the races, let alone imagine working in those conditions. Like, that would be exhausting.
It's interesting because we've got these many races. We've got 22 Grand Prix next year. The teams are crying out because their budgets are so high. Yet at the same time, they're at that borderline where they're probably needing to double up on crew.
And this is what I was going to say next. I don't know if people are aware of this. Traveling a lot takes a toll, and I know that there is some mental health aspects within teams for the crews that oftentimes are wrenching all night going to these races. They're away from their family. They're not getting the same glory as the drivers. I mean, think of them as well. Sure, okay, Liberty Media is going 25 races. Let's pound it down everyone's throat. Let's get all this money carbon neutral. There's so many other aspects to think about. And for me, when they hit 20, I was thinking, my God, this is a lot. But 25? There's 52 weeks in a year. Take out Christmas and an off season. That's every weekend almost in the summer. Yeah, I mean, that's ridiculous.
So, 21 races. What are your highlights of this season? What are you going to look back on 2019 and think, yeah, that was it?
McLaren turning things around. I think it was exciting to see them have a bit of a return to form. Didn't really break into the front-running pack. Honda winning races again. Seeing Red Bull take a chance and get on the podium. We had 3 different teams win.
And almost a Honda-powered 1, 2, 3.
Yes.
In Brazil.
Sure, yeah.
So close.
Some circumstances there, yes. But yeah, definitely. No, and that would have been amazing. I think overall, if you take out the first 5 races, when it was like 5 in a row, 1-2s for Mercedes, I was already ready to write off the season. But if you actually take those 5 races out and look at the rest of the year, it was a pretty epic season. It was pretty good. There was competition everywhere, different teams at the top. Midfield battle was epic. I think it was really good. And, young talent coming in that, teenagers again and proving themselves. So, I don't think there's any one key takeaway for me this season, but it just was, I think, a good season for F1. I think that their numbers were up in terms of viewership. I think that the interest was up. I think that, they're kind of turning that corner and hitting the younger generation again, which is good.
I'll throw in a couple, 1, 2 for you.
Okay.
The Ferrari battle.
Yeah, that was yes, epic. And I think I'm going to say it right now. Leclerc's the better driver.
Say that again?
Leclerc is the better driver.
Well, Matt, I think you've just laid it out there. If you agree with Matt that Charles Leclerc is a better driver than Sebastian Vettel, post, comment, subscribe, talk to us. Disagree with him or agree with him? I agree with him. I think he's absolutely right. I think Charles Leclerc is absolutely fantastic this season. Yeah,
I think Vettel, has he lost his motivation? I mean, Ricciardo came in and beat him, and then suddenly he moves to Ferrari. Now Leclerc comes in and beats him, and there's all these rumors. Where's Vettel going in the future? Is he going to stay? I mean, I don't know. It's almost like when he was at Red Bull, he had a teammate not capable of beating him when he won 4 world championships.
Who might that be?
Mr. Webber. That wasn't even Australian. That was horrible.
Quickly, low lights of the season.
Paul Ricard.
It was dreadful.
Yeah.
I mean, there's 2 elements to Paul Ricard. I don't think the racing was necessarily that good, but it's one of those few occasions where the actual outlay of the track actually gives it a picturesque quality that is quite ugly.
Some angles and photos, I see it and I think, wow, all those lines are very stunning and appealing and lead your eye. And then you see it on TV and you're like, oh my God, what is going on? There's so much to look at. And it's one of the only tracks that I can look at and be like, I don't know the layout. Like, which part is the asphalt and which part's a painted line? Like, it's a bit much.
It's like a massive it's like Where's Waldo's jumper.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. It is. And it's a big, long, boring track in my opinion. And yeah, I'm not... that race was pretty awful.
But this season, for me, was a season 2 halves. You had, I think you could almost argue to a degree, the championship was effectively wrapped up by the time we got to Canada.
Yeah.
And then almost as if...
And the FIA made that easier in Canada. Yeah. That was a low light for me. I'll throw that in there. That was a terrible decision.
That was kind of, a few weeks later, there was also the clash between Leclerc and Verstappen in Austria. You then had the second half of the season, where all of a sudden it's the racing is fantastic. And I was like, wait, where did this happen? Where was this in the first half of the season? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that a couple of things happened. Ferrari got their shit together.
No, they got something together.
Yeah, well, let's not... It is honest motorsport news. I don't have an opinion on that. That's my honest truth on it. I don't know enough about the technical specifications to say, yes, they were doing something bizarre. It is peculiar that they were a lot slower at the end of the year after that story surfaced, isn't it? But
if you do want to learn more about that particular story, just check into one of our previous videos of Sam Collins talking about the Ferrari cheating scandal.
Yes, yeah. I'll leave that one to you guys.
Or if Ferrari cheat, is it actually a scandal anymore, or is it just
normal? Yeah, that's just Ferrari. We'll call it passion. Ferrari's passion. No, I think that the mid-season turn, because a couple teams got their stuff together. Honda came through big time. Verstappen was amazing. I think you got to give him a ton of credit for the way he drove that car this year. Probably the most determined driver on the grid right now in terms of going back to Hulkenberg, pushing beyond the limits. And that's probably the best race pace I've seen since Alonso wringing the neck out of a shit McLaren for years. That was really pushing it. And then the midfield was just so tight all year that finally, with the front not eclipsing the fact that there was good action further down the order, that the TV directors failed to show. Poor Carlos Sainz, it took him the whole year of selling himself to the damn director before he got any notifications or credit. It was really good from that point on. So you're right, it was sort of a tale of two seasons.
Last thing, bonus point for fastest lap. Yay, nay, or did you just not notice after a while?
Hated it at first. Didn't like the concept, but it grew on me. It was another element for the championship. It ultimately, I'm sure if you go back, Sainz 1 point, but he didn't have any fastest laps. You'd have to go back and detract all those points to see if it made a substantial difference. But the big thing they did for me that I liked is they only did it for point scoring positions. Yeah. Because then if you're Hamilton and you've had a bad race, you just box in 2 laps to go, super softs, go for it. Another point for him. That would be stupid. So no, I think that keeping it to the point scoring positions was a good way to limit it.
Well, I think that's been covered everything in our very short F1 season review for 2019. I think people should like this, man. What do you think?
Like, subscribe, click the bell.
This has been Let's Go Racing. I've been Leigh O'Gorman, and you are
Matt Trivett.